Welcome back to the Adam Schefter Podcast. Happy 2025 to everybody. We are back after a 2-week hiatus, and we are back for the start of the NFL postseason in every way, shape, and form. And that means the firing and hiring of coaches, the start of the postseason, and all the drama that the NFL constantly brings. And that is why the NFL is the greatest reality show that is out there. And to kick off the new year, we are going to be joined by the former head coach of the Houston Texans, the current head coach of Boston College, a man that knows New England well. Bill O'Brien will be by to discuss some of his NFL memories, what it's like to coach in college today, how Bill Belichick will perform at North Carolina, and a whole host of topics that we hope you'll find interesting. But before we get to the head coach of Boston College, Bill O'Brien, of course, we first get to Ty Schmit, one of the hosts of the Pat McAfee Show, and of course, the man that leads us each week on the weekly Six-Pack.
Happy New Year, Shefty. Great to be back. Feels like it's been a while since we've done this, and man, you mentioned it. I feel like we say this every week, but it rings true now. Can you believe the playoffs are already here? I mean, it seems like week one, I was getting geared up for Packers-Eagles in Brazil, and now, boom, got a rematch in the first round of the playoffs. It's crazy how quickly time flies.
I always say it to people, like, this is one of, to me, the craziest times of the year because you've got all the news, all the happenings with all the teams going on at the same time that you've got playoff games Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So ESPN has pregame shows Saturday, pregame shows Sunday, pregame shows Monday. We're used to getting ready for one pregame show all season long, and now it's 3 this upcoming weekend in addition to all the news that's going on. So it's always, to me, these 2-3 weeks that you need to get through where there are playoff games on Saturday, Sunday, now Monday. It always is one of the absolute busiest times of the year, but it's also one of the most intriguing, dramatic, and fun times of the year as well.
Without a doubt. And now with the college football playoff too squeezed in there, we got a hell of a weekend on tap here. But you mentioned it there, Shefty. Let's hop into topic number 1 of the Six-Pack. Black Monday was yesterday. I feel like it was a little more tame than maybe we were expecting. I don't know, maybe you think differently, but of all the moves that were made yesterday, what was the most surprising to you?
Well, let me just say this, Ty. We are taping this at roughly 8:50 a.m. on Tuesday. I still think we're going to get more action, okay? I think we're still waiting for clarity, whenever that comes, in Las Vegas, Tennessee, and Dallas. And I think anything is possible in any of these places. So let's just start there. But let's go back to Monday. And let's revisit the idea that there was not as much activity as usual. And I would say to me that the biggest headline on the Monday after the end of the regular season was all the people that teams kept. The Giants kept head coach Brian Daboll and general manager Joe Schoen. The Indianapolis Colts kept head coach Shane Steichen and general manager Chris Ballard. The Jacksonville Jaguars kept their general manager, Trent Baalke. And I think those were some of the moves that created some noise and ripples around the league. There were a lot of people that were surprised that Jacksonville kept Trent Baalke at a time where they got rid of Doug Peterson, because now you're trying to hire a head coach who comes in, who inherits that general manager, who's had the chance to hire 3 head coaches. And that is not going to be for everybody. It's going to raise questions that the Jaguars ownership is going to have to address with each individual candidate moving forward. The Giants, of course, will be under a lot of pressure. And as I think about it, it's just that to me was the headline of Monday, is that all these people kept their jobs at a time where some of these people were wondering and speculating that many of them would be dismissed.
Like you said, Shefty, I think the biggest news of yesterday really was all these different GMs and head coaches coming back. So let's move on to topic number 2. What exactly does that mean? Is that, we talk a lot now in the NFL with guys getting 1 year and getting fired and not being able to build a culture or anything like that. But a couple of these GMs and head coaches have had multiple opportunities here, haven't been successful, and ownership is still, kind of sticking with them and bringing them back. What does that mean moving forward?
Well, it's interesting because the fact that there were so few moves on the Monday after the regular season instantly clicked into my mind. Okay, all this means is that 2025 is going to be busier and messier and bloodier than 2024, the end of that season. That's what I thought, because all these people that we've talked about and wondered about their futures, whether it was in New York, whether it was in Jacksonville, whether it was in Indianapolis, whether it was in Miami, whether it was in any of the places that have come out and stood behind their people and announced that they will be back, all those questions, they now bleed into next season. That's all it is. And all these people that were on the hot seat, they're still on the hot seat. It's just another year that we're just tracking them. And inevitably, when you do this over time, you see that if there is a year in which there are fewer firings than normal, inevitably, the next year, there are more firings than normal. So if this, when it finishes up, after all the action, has fewer moves, less action, not as many firings as other years, I'm just telling you right now, all that sets up is a busier 2025 than normal. That's what's going to happen. Just pushing it down the road to another time. But look, I think it's something that should be applauded, teams taking a patient route, because this is not a patient league. People don't react like that. They usually fire now and ask questions later. And now they're giving guys in certain places a little bit more time to prove that they can get the job done or not. But just because they were retained doesn't mean that the fans in New York or Jacksonville or Indianapolis are happy right now and that, okay, we're now back behind our guys. Let's go full force into the 2025 season.
Yeah, and maybe it's because for all those teams, it doesn't feel like, they were this close to making the playoffs. It doesn't seem like they're all going to come back and all of a sudden you're going to go from, 3-14 or 4-13, whatever the case is. You're not going to go from that to, hey, we're 10-7 and we're going to make the playoffs this year. So I suppose we'll see. Speaking of the hot seat, though, let's move on to topic number 3, and a guy who was basically on the hot seat all year, was kind of on the hot seat starting at the end of last year. How do you feel about the Bears calling Mike McCarthy?
Well, I think this is fascinating. And again, as we tape this on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., to my knowledge, the Bears still have not gotten an answer from the Cowboys about whether or not permission would be granted to interview Mike McCarthy. Now, I guess Dallas can just sit there and let time waste this week and not have to respond. But next week, Mike McCarthy would be free to go talk to the Chicago Bears if that's what he wanted. But Dallas has got this week, and we'll see how this one plays out. But to me, that provides a little window into what Dallas is thinking. And I think Jerry Jones absolutely is interested in having Mike McCarthy back. I'm not sure that everybody in the organization is convinced. If they were, the deal would be done. It wouldn't be dragging out as long. But we've seen that Dallas has a tendency to let these deals linger for a long time. It took them a long time to get the Dak Prescott deal done. It didn't get done until the first day of the regular season. We saw the CD Lamb deal take a long time this past summer, at a time when other wide receiver deals were getting done. And Jerry Jones never seems to be in any rush, because while we wait for him to do his deals, everybody's talking about his team. So that's a win for him right there. Just all the attention it brings. And it's more attention on the Cowboys right now. But the Bears' request, to me, as the week unfolds, provides a little window into what the Cowboys may or may not be thinking about Mike McCarthy as we move forward. So that, to me, is very interesting. And it doesn't mean he's going to be back or not be back. That's still one of the places that's still up in the air. As we record this, there are 5 teams that have changed head coaches. Dallas very well could become the 6th. We'll wait and see. But that one still needs to be resolved here in the coming days.
Dallas is a very puzzling situation, too, because I think we rushed to judgment, asking, hey, is McCarthy going to get fired, even though he's coming off, multiple 12-win seasons in a row? And then you look at how long Jason Garrett was around. Jerry he's not really the kind of guy who is going to cut bait very quickly. And also, it obviously takes a very special kind of person and coach to coach in Dallas.
And Jerry likes things on his terms. He likes it on his terms. Mike McCarthy understands those terms. So if there's a meeting on common ground where Jerry's terms are met and Mike can live with that, then I think that they could figure out a way to get a deal done. And if they can't, then Mike moves on and Dallas moves on.
And on the flip side for Chicago, I think part of me would, die a little bit with McCarthy winning a Super Bowl with the Packers. It'd be weird seeing him be the head coach of the Bears, but the Bears are also a very puzzling situation. It seems like they've, reached out for wanting to interview damn near everyone who's available right now, because obviously they need to get that right. Speaking of reaching out for interviews and doing all that kind of stuff, let's move on to topic number 4. We touched on this yesterday on Pat's show with you, Schefty. What do you think of the current interview rules and the whole process that that involves, and how it's kind of, it really is a little ass backwards the way that they make these guys interview for head coaching jobs?
It's changed the dynamics of the way coaches are interviewed and hired. I've covered the NFL since 1990. This is 35 years or so covering this league. And I'm just telling you, during all the coaching searches that I've ever covered, most jobs in the past typically have been filled by the divisional playoff round. So 2 weeks from now, I always remember going into the pregame shows on Saturday and Sunday, and we'd have 75% of the jobs filled. There'd be another opening or two. And by conference championship Sunday, they were all filled. All of them. Now, you cannot even conduct an in-person interview with a coach and another staff, i.e. Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Brian Flores, until after the divisional playoff round. So the hires that used to be done by then can't be done by now because of the timing. And it creates a whole convoluted system. Now, it wasn't great before either, where Aaron Glenn or Ben Johnson or Brian Flores, to use those 3 examples, would be in the playoffs, and here they were cramming for the biggest week of their team season. At the same time, they're hosting owners and executives from other NFL teams trying to prepare for the interview of their life that they've spent their career getting ready for. And you have this meeting of 2 of the most significant moments for a team and an individual all at once. And that's not fair to the guy either. But this slows it down so much. And I guess that's what the league wanted, because the league wants teams to take a long, thorough look at all candidates, abide by the Rooney Rule, do the right thing, give everybody fair and equal consideration. And I think that's admirable. But the process is clunky. It's just clunky. It's prolonged. It's inevitable. It's something that I think there's no easy solution. But I just know that people who are waiting for their teams to hire coaches or their teams to lose a coach, we're going to be waiting until the end of January. And some of these hirings may go into, say, Super Bowl week or right after. And this used to be a quick process. It no longer is. So, again, I think it's another thing the NFL likes, because all it does is it creates more conversation around which team is going to hire which guy for a longer period of time. So while we're talking about the upcoming wild card games and then the divisional playoff games and then the conference championship games, there's also the conversation about which team is going to hire which coach to take over as the head coach of their particular franchise. So I guess the league wins, but selfishly, personally, just one more thing that just hangs over me for a longer period of time.
Yeah, extends your work window a couple months, I guess. But like you mentioned, I'm sure the league, if you do it that way, it extends it right after the Super Bowl, right into draft conversation.
And right into the combine, right into free agency, right into the draft, right into mini camps, right into throwing camps, right into the start of training camp. The league wants nobody to ever get a break. That's how the league likes it.
Exactly. But I do appreciate, like you said, the fact that, because in a lot of these situations, we're going to get coordinators from teams in the, conference championships or in the Super Bowl. And it never sat right with me that the only way these guys could potentially get a job was, you sit on a Zoom interview for 2 hours, maybe multiple times a week, the week of the conference championship. And, I mean, sometimes, hey, maybe you're an in-person interview and that's how your personality shines through. And, you have a better opportunity once you can actually put the previous season to rest and go have an opportunity to get a job. But I mean, who knows? Is this the kind of thing, like, how many times do you think this is going to change over the next few years? Like, will they just kind of keep shifting the dates around for when this happens? Or
Well, they're always refining it to what they think is better. So what they have this year probably will be tweaked next year and tweaked the year. It's always a process in motion. It's always being adjusted. The league is always trying to make it better. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but it's never just this is it and this is how we're going to do it. Not with the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hyperbole to say, but it's also incredibly true. The NFL never sleeps. I mean, we talk about it year round. No matter, there's always something to talk about. You mentioned the draft there, Schefty. Let's move on to topic number 5. The Titans are on the clock officially. Kind of crazy. I feel like more so this year than in years past. There was so much movement the last week of the season. So if you were one of those bottom tier teams, you actually were quite invested in multiple teams on that last Sunday. What are your thoughts on the Titans having the number 1 pick, them being on the clock, and what they'll eventually do with it?
Amazing, right? The Giants had the number 1 pick, the Patriots had the number 1 pick, and the Titans finished with the number 1 pick. And Tennessee with the top pick this year. That'll mark the 7th time since 2002 that an AFC South team is going to have the first overall pick.
Wow.
7 times in the last 23 years, the number 1 overall pick has come from the AFC South. We could probably think of some of those former number 1 overall picks off the top of our head. Mario Williams comes to mind right away. Trevor Lawrence comes to mind. Trayvon Walker comes to mind.
Andrew Luck
comes to mind. There have been a lot of ones going to that division. There's going to be another one. My guess is Shedeur Sanders is the likely number 1 overall pick right now. Tennessee needs a quarterback. Tennessee's going to be in that market. It's got its chance to take whoever they want at the top of the draft. Obviously, Will Levis did not work out this year the way that they would have wanted. So the Titans are on the clock, and there's going to be a lot of speculation about that team and who it's going to pick. But as we mentioned before, as we tape this Tuesday morning, we still are waiting to see how this is going to work in Tennessee and who's going to be making that pick and what coach is going to be making that. Again, we need clarity before we know what Tennessee is doing there, and we don't have that with Tennessee just yet.
And there's obviously going to be a lot of conjecture leading up to the draft on Shedeur and, the picture of him wearing the Giants cleats before the bowl game or wanting to go to the Raiders, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think there's any way that we have an Eli Manning situation? I mean, Deion has basically come out and said, like, we know where we're going. I mean, maybe he doesn't care as long as he goes 1 overall, but do you think there's a world where Shedeur basically orchestrates, what Eli Manning did in order to not go to Tennessee?
It's hard to do that. It is very hard to do that. You got to have a huge stomach and a huge aversion to going to a particular place. And I don't know that Tennessee is going to be able to turn off the Sanders family that much that we could get that type of instance. I'm not expecting that. That doesn't mean they can't do it. I don't think they'll do that. I think you look at it and you say, okay, here's a organization that's had a little bit of instability recently, but they're going to be building a new stadium that they're opening. They are in a no-tax state, and Deion, above anything else, is a businessman.
Yep.
So he knows that Shedeur's money is worth at least 10% more in Tennessee. So, no, I don't see them doing anything like that if that's the pick that the Titans are planning to make. And I think Deion will be fine with that. No issues. We'll see how it plays out. But the Titans, as you mentioned, are on the clock.
I suppose if you want to win, go into a division where there have been 7 number 1 picks in the last 20 or so years. That's not the worst situation to end up in. You mentioned another team there, Schefty, who would have been on the clock if not for winning on Sunday. Let's move to the 6th and final topic of this week's 6-pack. Not just with the draft process, but head coach as well. What do the Patriots do next?
Well, it is fascinating, right? Because everybody just assumes that Mike Vrabel is going to be the head coach. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But Mike Vrabel is going to be interviewing with the Bears this week. The Saints are going to want to talk to him. He's already talked to the Jets. I think every place that has an opening is going to want to talk to Mike Vrabel, basically. So he's going to have a lot of options. And New England's never been through the head coach hiring process. It had Bill Belichick. It appointed Gerard Mayo. So this is an opportunity for Robert Kraft to sit down to get to talk to some candidates. We don't know if he's going to fall in love with some guy. We don't know if somebody's going to say something that's going to make him think. Again, do I think he's interested in Mike Vrabel? I do. Do I think Mike Vrabel's interested in New England? I do. But you know what? Is New England going to offer as much money as some of these other places for Mike Vrabel? Does Mike Vrabel like Caleb Williams more than he does Drake May? Does he like the quarterback situation or the ownership group in New Orleans more than he does New England? What does he think of New York with the Jets, where he could basically run the entire organization and have nobody to answer to and have free reign? Like, what appeals to him? What is most desirable to him? And is there going to be a team that steps up for him in a way that maybe New England doesn't? These are questions that are going to unfold over time. And a lot of people thought after the Patriots lost out on the number one pick by winning the last game of the season, a meaningless game that they beat the Bills in that cost them the number one overall selection. I had people text me actually, that's why they fired Gerard Mayo, because he cost them the number one pick. That's not why they fired Gerard Mayo. You heard Robert Kraft. This had been building. They had been looking into it. I don't think this was a move they intended or wanted or planned to make. But over the course of the final weeks of the season, there were disappointing losses. There were public gaffes. There was anger and apathy from fans. And I think that the more that Robert Kraft looked into it, the more uncomfortable he felt, to the point where after the game on Sunday, he made the decision to fire Gerard Mayo. And I know that a lot of former Patriot players, Rob Gronkowski was not happy with it. Teddy Bruschi not happy with it. I'm sure Randy Moss not happy with it, because they know Gerard as a teammate and loved him and know the type of individual he is. But there are other people who felt like in that organization, or others across the league, like, hey, I could see why Robert Kraft would make this move. So there are a couple of schools of thought. And the fact of the matter is, here's the deal. They have a chance to go out and now hire a new coach. They've got the quarterback. They've got an appealing situation. If they get the next head coaching hire right, the fans are not going to be upset at all, and they're going to be happy that the organization is going in a new direction.